Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we dig into the shared source material to pull out the stories you need to hear.
And today, we've got a really compelling one.
We're talking about a franchise that really had to fight for its identity. A team built on, well, tenacity and a deep, deep connection to its city. The Memphis Grizzlies.
It's an incredible story, really, full of these massive highs and some pretty crushing lows.
Right, and you have to remember, this is a team that started out as almost an afterthought up in Canada.
Mm-hmm. And now they're the only major pro sports team in Memphis, one of only 4 in the whole state of Tennessee. That's a huge anchor for a city.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to track the entire evolution of this franchise.
Which means we have to start with those very volatile early years in Vancouver.
Exactly. Then we'll dig into the era that really gave them their soul, the grit and grind years.
And then bring it all the way to today with the high-octane and you could say sometimes tumultuous John Morant era. Our sources are just packed with the history, the big trades, the cultural moments.
Yeah, we're going to navigate some infamous trades, some major ownership changes,
Mm-hmm.
and the philosophies that really dictated their success. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The mid-90s.
The NBA is looking to expand.
Right, they're looking north. And so in 1995, the Vancouver Grizzlies are born in the very same season as the Toronto Raptors. This was the league's big return to Canada.
And there was a lot of excitement, sure, but the reality on the ground was tough from day one.
It was. Just look at where they were placed. The Midwest Division of the Western Conference.
Geographically, that just makes no sense.
None at all. Think about the travel. You're a team in Vancouver, and your division rivals are in, Utah, Denver, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. The travel was just crippling. It made it so hard to recruit players, so hard to keep them. It was a huge factor in why they struggled so much out of the gate.
And the name itself, Grizzlies, that wasn't even the first choice, was it?
No, and this is a great little piece of trivia. The original idea was the Vancouver Mounties.
The Mounties?
Yeah, but the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, they actually stepped in and formally objected.
Wow.
So the franchise had to pivot, and they landed on Grizzlies, which was a nod to the grizzly bear, the big local animal in British Columbia.
A move that probably saved us from some very awkward branding down the line.
Probably. So for 6 seasons, they called General Motors Place home. But to put it mildly, those 6 seasons were defined by losing.
A lot of losing.
A historic amount. They never won more than 19 games in a single season while they were in Vancouver.
19.
And it was that combination of things, the losing, the brutal travel, and a really weak Canadian dollar compared to the U.S. dollar. The economics just didn't work.
So the pressure just kept mounting until, well, it broke.
It did. The official process started on March 26, 2001. The team formally applied to relocate.
And the NBA didn't fight it.
No, they saw the writing on the wall. On July 3, 2001, the move to Memphis, Tennessee was approved. The Raptors were suddenly the only NBA team left in Canada.
So they get to Memphis, and you'd think, okay, new city, new name, a grizzly bear in the Mississippi Delta doesn't quite fit.
That's what the ownership thought, too. They were exploring a name change.
But the community pushed back.
They pushed back hard. The locals really wanted to keep the name Grizzlies.
Why, though? What was the connection?
It's this forgotten piece of local sports history. Memphis actually had a pro football team in the Old World Football League back in 74 and 75.
Okay, they were called?
The Memphis Grizzlies.
No way.
Yeah. So for the city, the name already had roots. It felt like theirs, which made the whole relocation feel a little less, foreign.
And that move created one of the great geographical oddities in all of sports.
It really did. Moving from the Pacific Northwest all the way to Memphis, deep in the South, suddenly made Memphis the easternmost city in the Western Conference.
Which it still is today. It's just a strange quirk of history.
Completely. And before they built the FedEx Forum, they started out in a pretty iconic Memphis building.
The Pyramid.
The Pyramid Arena, a giant, pyramid. They played their first 3 seasons there from 2001 to 2004 before moving into their current home.
And it's important to note, Memphis wasn't a total basketball desert before the NBA arrived.
Not at all. They had the Memphis Sounds in the ABA from 1970 to 75, so the appetite was there. The city was just waiting for the right team.
Okay, so the franchise finds its permanent home, but now the real work begins. They have to actually build a winning team. And that starts with a truly game-changing draft.
The 2001 draft is probably the single most important moment in the team's early history.
A total clean slate.
And they took full advantage. They made a huge trade with the Atlanta Hawks to get the rights to the 3rd overall pick.
Pau Gasol.
Pau Gasol. And then with their own pick, number 6, they took Shane Battier.
A really smart defensive-minded player.
Exactly. And they weren't done. The GM, Billy Knight, also traded their point guard, Mike Bibby, to the Kings for Jason Williams.
White chocolate.
The one and only. He brought an immediate jolt of excitement to that new market.
So that's a massive talent injection right away. And Pau, he delivered on the hype almost immediately.
He was spectacular. He wins the NBA Rookie of the Year award that first season. He was the franchise's first legitimate, bankable star. Just a level of skill they had never had before.
And yet, even after landing the Rookie of the Year, GM Billy Knight gets fired.
Well, the team still finished 23-59. The ownership felt they needed a complete cultural reset. The losing mentality from Vancouver was still lingering.
So they go out and make a huge splash.
A legendary splash. In 2002, they hire Hall of Famer Jerry West as their new general manager.
A logo himself.
And he didn't just tweak the roster, he changed the entire culture. He wins Executive of the Year in 2004 because he just overhauled everything.
Yeah.
He fired the coach, brought in the veteran Hubie Brown, and he brought in key role players like Mike Miller and James Posey to add toughness and shooting around Pau.
So West is building the first truly successful Grizzlies team. But we have to talk about this. This skeleton in the closet from the Vancouver days.
Oh, the Otis Thorpe trade.
A mistake that might have cost them a shot at a title.
It's a cautionary tale for every front office in sports. Don't trade unprotected future first-round picks.
So what happened?
Back in 1997, the Vancouver front office traded their 2003 first-round pick, completely unprotected, to the Detroit Pistons for a veteran forward named Otis Thorpe.
And of course, the Grizzlies were terrible in the years leading up to 2003.
Just terrible, which meant that pick became more and more valuable. It ended up being the number 2 overall pick in the 2003 draft.
One of the most loaded drafts in history.
An all-time draft class. So the Grizzlies are just watching as they could have had their choice of Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, or Dwayne Wade.
And they gave that up for Otis Thorpe, who
played only 47 games for them before they let him go.
Unbelievable.
It's brutal. They basically traded a future Hall of Famer for less than a season of an aging vet. The only saving grace is that Detroit used the pick on Darko Milicic, who was a bust, but still, the opportunity was lost.
That's a huge what-if that hangs over everything.
It really is.
But even with that massive hole, Jerry West gets the team to the playoffs for the first time ever in 2004.
He does. Hubie Brown wins Coach of the Year, the team wins 50 games for the first time, and they get the 6th seed. It was a complete turnaround.
But the playoffs were a different story. A very harsh lesson.
A vertical learning curve, as they say. They got swept 4-0 in the first round by the Spurs.
Ouch.
And it became a pattern. They got swept again in 2005 by the Suns, and then swept a third time in 2006 by the Mavericks.
3 straight playoff appearances, 3 straight sweeps.
Yeah. It showed they could win in the regular season, but they just weren't built for the postseason grind.
We also see Hubie Brown step down. There's friction with the new coach, Mike Fratello. It starts to unravel a bit.
It does. And then Pau Gasol breaks his foot before the 2006-07 season, and the team just craters. They finish with the worst record in the league, 22-60.
And that was it for Jerry West?
That was it. He resigned. He'd brought them relevance and respectability, but not the ultimate prize.
Which brings in a new GM, Chris Wallace, who makes a key draft pick right away.
In the 2007 draft, they get the 4th pick and select Mike Conley Jr.,
the future.
the absolute foundation for the next decade. And then in 2008 comes the trade that officially ends the Pau Gasol era.
And at the time, this was seen as an absolutely terrible, lopsided trade.
Oh, people were furious.
Yeah.
On February 1st, 2008, they send Pau to the Lakers. And in return, they get back Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKee, 2 first-round picks, and
the hidden gem.
the rights to Pau's younger brother, Marc Gasol, who was playing over in Spain.
Nobody knew who Marc Gasol was at the time. The Lakers get Pau and immediately win titles. It looked like a fleece job.
It did, but Marc's development into this all-world defensive center completely flipped the script on that trade. It ended up being maybe the best trade in franchise history, just accidentally.
Before that new era really takes hold, there were some strange moments.
A few false starts for sure. They drafted Hashim Thabit 2nd overall in 2009, a huge bust.
And the Allen Iverson experiment.
Oh, that was bizarre. He signed a one-year deal, played 3 games, none of them in Memphis, complained about his role, and was gone. Just a weird footnote.
But slowly, the pieces are coming together. They trade for Zach Randolph.
Z-Bo. And Marc Gasol is starting to look like the real deal. And with Mike Conley running the point, you could see something building. They went 40-42 in 2009-10. The identity was shifting.
Right. It wasn't about finesse anymore.
No, it was becoming tough, physical, and rugged.
Which brings us to the most iconic period in the team's history.
The grit and grind era.
And that phrase, grit and grind, it wasn't just marketing, was it?
No, it was a whole philosophy, a tactical commitment. It was built on 2 things. 1, suffocating disruptive defense. And 2, a powerful inside-out offense.
And the stats really back that up.
They do. In that 2010-11 season, they led the entire league in steals. They just harassed you on defense. And on offense, since they couldn't really shoot threes, they just pounded the ball inside to Z-Bo and Marc Gasol and dominated the paint.
This whole identity really formed around 4 key players, the big 4.
The core 4. You had Mike Conley, the steady leader at the point. Zach Randolph, Z-Bo, just a beast inside. His number 50 is retired now.
Marc Gasol, the brilliant defensive anchor.
And then the heart and soul of the whole thing, Tony Allen.
The grindfather.
The grindfather. He was defense in human form. His intensity just set the tone for the entire team. His number 9 is getting retired soon, too. Those 4 guys were Memphis basketball.
And the first real payoff for this new identity comes in the 2011 playoffs. They get in as an 8 seed.
An 8 seed, yeah. And their opponent, the number 1 seed San Antonio Spurs. The team that had always owned them.
The expectation was another sweep.
Of course. But this Grizzlies team was different. They went in there and they just shocked the world.
It was just a series of firsts for the franchise.
A total breakthrough. They got their first ever playoff game win. Their first ever home playoff game win. And then they won the series, 4-2, their first ever playoff series victory.
That atmosphere in the FedEx Forum must have been electric.
Legendary. It was just this explosion of joy and validation for the city and the team.
And that put them in some pretty elite company.
It did. It was only the 4th time an 8 seed had beaten a 1 seed in NBA history. They went on to lose a tough 7-game series to OKC, but the statement was made.
They missed the playoffs the next year, but then they hit their absolute peak in the 2012-13 season.
That was the year. A new owner, Robert Pera, comes in, and they make a huge trade mid-season.
Trading away Rudy Gay.
Yeah, their leading scorer. For more defensive-minded guys like Tayshaun Prince, it was a signal that they were all in on grit and grind.
And it worked.
It worked perfectly. They finished with the best record in franchise history, 56-26.
And Marc Gasol gets named Defensive Player of the Year.
He was a monster that season, and that playoff run was the high point. They got revenge on the Clippers, who beat them the year before. Then they beat a great OKC team.
Reaching the Western Conference Finals for the first time ever.
The first and only time. It was the culmination of everything they'd built.
But then, the old nemesis was waiting.
The Spurs. And they were just on another level. They swept the Grizzlies 4-0, a really painful, anticlimactic end to a magical season.
The next few years, they were always in the mix, but you could see the physical toll of that style starting to add up.
For sure. They made the playoffs 7 straight years. The 2015 run was memorable.
A Mike Conley masked series.
Yes. He breaks his face, comes back wearing a protective mask, and they actually go up 2-1 on the Warriors, who were on their way to a title. Just pure toughness.
The wheels finally came off in 2016.
The injuries just decimated them. It was brutal. They set an NBA record that year by using 28 different players.
28?
Just a revolving door. And they got swept by the Spurs again in the first round.
And that was pretty much the end of the era.
It was. In the summer of 2017, Z-Bo left for the Kings, and Tony Allen left for the Pelicans. The grit and grind chapter was officially closed.
And the years immediately after were pretty rough.
Very rough. They tied the franchise record with a 19-game losing streak in 2018, and then in 2019, they traded the last 2 pillars.
Marc Gasol goes to Toronto.
And wins the championship that same year. A bittersweet moment.
And finally, Mike Conley is traded to the Jazz. But the team immediately announced they'd retire as number 11, a sign of ultimate respect.
A total reset. The end of one era and the beginning of a completely new one.
Which brings us to 2019 and the Ja Morant era. And this was a total philosophical shift from the top down.
A radical shift. The owner, Robert Pera, basically cleaned house. He wanted a modern, analytics-driven front office.
So Chris Wallace, the longtime GM, is moved to a scouting role.
Right, and they promote a young executive, Zachary Kleiman, to be the new GM.
Kleiman's first moves were to hire Taylor Jenkins as coach, and then, well, he got very lucky in the draft lottery.
The timing was perfect. They land the number 2 overall pick in the 2019 draft.
And they take Ja Morant.
An explosive, athletic point guard who is the complete opposite of the old grit and grind style. They also trade up to get Brandon Clark. A new core was born overnight.
And Morant's impact was just immediate.
Instant electricity. He brought a swagger and a high-flying style back to Memphis.
He wins Rookie of the Year almost unanimously.
99 out of 100 first-place votes. It was clear right away that the direction had changed for the better.
By their second year, 2020-21, they're already in the playoff hunt.
Yeah, they used that new play-in tournament. They beat the Spurs, and then they have this amazing game against Steph Curry and the Warriors.
Morant goes off for 35.
And they win, clinching the 8th seed. They lost to the Jazz in the first round, but they even stole a game in that series. You could see the potential.
And then the 2021-22 season happens, and they make a huge leap.
A massive leap. From a plucky play-in team to a legitimate contender, they finish 56-26.
Tying the franchise record for wins.
Tying the record, yeah. And they win their first ever division title and get the number 2 seed in the West.
They lost to the Warriors in the second round, but the message was sent. The Grizzlies were back.
For sure. And that success carried into the next year. They won 51 games, won the division again, got the 2nd seed again.
And that was the year Jaren Jackson Jr. really broke out.
He did. He made the All-Star team, and he won Defensive Player of the Year, just like Marc Gasol did. It showed that even with this new, fast-paced style, elite defense was still in their DNA.
But that playoff run ended in disappointment.
A big disappointment. They got upset by the 7th seed Lakers in the first round. Some of their youth and inexperience really showed in that series.
And if the grit and grind era ended because of age and attrition, the 2023-24 season was derailed by, well, volatility and injuries.
It was a disaster of a year. Morant was suspended for the first 25 games for off-court issues. He comes back, looks great, and then he tears his shoulder and is out for the season.
And the injuries just piled up from there. It was like 2016 all over again.
A total repeat. Key guys, they brought in like Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose. They barely played. They finished 27-55 and set another league record for the most players used in a season.
So when you look at their record over the last 5 years, it's just this wild roller coaster.
It's incredible. 2 50-plus win seasons and 2 division titles, sandwiched around a play-in appearance and a total collapse due to injury. The highs are incredibly high, but the potential for things to go south is always there.
It's a fascinating dynamic. And beyond just the wins and losses, this team has done an amazing job of weaving the culture of Memphis into its identity.
More than maybe any other team in the league.
We've talked about the arenas, from GM Place to the Pyramid to the FedEx Forum. But it's the traditions inside those buildings that really matter.
Absolutely. And you have to start with the mascot, Grizz.
Who has this really touching story connected to the community.
Yeah, in 2007, the performer who plays Grizz was diagnosed with cancer. And the team started this Friends of Grizz program to raise money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which is such a vital institution in Memphis. It created this deep, meaningful bond.
And then you have the visual signature of the playoff runs. The Growl Towels.
The gold Growl Towels. They're everywhere during the playoffs.
And they always have these perfect, defiant slogans on them.
Slogans like grit and grind, all heart, and my personal favorite, ain't no running in the M.
It's so perfectly Memphis.
It is. But maybe the most organic tradition of all is the whoop that trick chant.
Which came completely out of nowhere.
Totally spontaneous. It's from a song in the movie Hustle and Flow, which was filmed in Memphis. And during a heated playoff series against the Clippers in 2013, the crowd just started chanting it. It wasn't planned. It wasn't corporate. It was just real.
That's amazing. And that same level of cultural connection shows up in their uniforms?
Especially the City Edition uniforms. They've been incredible. The first one in 2017 was a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr.
Others have used lettering inspired by the I Am a Man sanitation strike banners from 1968.
They've paid tribute to Stax Records and Isaac Hayes, to the Memphis rap scene, even to the city's pro wrestling history.
That's a level of detail and respect you just don't see anywhere else.
It's brilliant. It makes the team feel like it truly belongs to the city and its history.
Now, all that identity and toughness created some pretty intense rivalries, almost all of them forged in the playoffs. Let's start with the Clippers.
The Clippers' rivalry was just pure animosity. It was their Lob City Flash against the Grizzlies' grit and grind physicality.
And that got personal.
Very personal. You had Zebo and Blake Griffin constantly getting into it. There was the infamous floppers giveaway where the Grizzlies gave out flip-flops to mock the Clippers. It was nasty.
Then you have the Thunder, a rivalry with a bit more history.
Yeah, it goes back to the Vancouver-Seattle days. But it really heated up with 4 different playoff matchups.
The 2014 series was an all-timer.
An epic 7-game war. 4 straight games went to overtime. But it ended in heartbreak for Memphis when Zebo got suspended for Game 7.
And finally, the oldest rivalry, the one against the Spurs.
The Spurs are the ultimate measuring stick for this franchise. It started with that first-ever playoff sweep in 2004.
But it also includes their greatest moment, the 2011 upset.
That 8-seed over 1-seed upset was the moment the Grizzlies arrived. But in the end, the Spurs always seemed to have their number when it really mattered.
Sweeping them in the conference finals in 2013.
And sweeping them again in 2016, the Spurs have consistently been the mountain they just couldn't quite climb.
So when you zoom out and look at the whole picture, you see this constant cycle of change, especially in the front office.
A lot of turnover.
Yeah.
You go from Stu Jackson in Vancouver to Jerry West building the first winner to Chris Wallace overseeing grit and grind, and now to Zach Kleiman in the analytics era. Each GM brought a totally different philosophy.
And even without a championship, they've built a real legacy.
A strong one. You've got Hall of Famers who played there, like Pau Gasol and Vince Carter. Hall of Fame contributors like Jerry West and Hubie Brown.
And most importantly, they've honored their own.
They really have. Retiring the numbers of Zebo, Marc Gasol, and soon Tony Allen and Mike Conley, it shows a deep respect for that era and what it meant to the city.
So to wrap this all up, the main theme seems to be a franchise that has constantly had to define and redefine itself, navigating these incredible highs and devastating lows.
I think that's exactly right. And the biggest takeaway for me is how critical those key personnel decisions were. Jerry West coming in, trading Pau for the rights to Marc, Kleiman drafting John Morant. Those moments changed everything. And the way they've woven Memphis culture into their very fabric is just unique.
Which leaves us with a final thought to connect all of this. The John Morant era is defined by incredible talent, but also by that volatility we talked about, the injuries, the off-court issues. It feels unstable.
And given the franchise's history of these massive swings between success and rebuilding, it raises a really important question for you to think about.
How can the current front office, with this amazing young core, learn from the mistakes of the past?
Yeah.
How do they avoid the injury-fueled collapse that ended the grit and grind era and that we saw a preview of in 2024? How do they finally achieve the kind of sustained championship-level success that has always been just out of reach?
How do they finally break the cycle of boom and bust that has defined their entire history? That's the challenge ahead. And that's something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.
Welcome to The Debate. Today we're diving deep into the history of the Memphis Grizzlies. And it's a really distinctive, almost improbable history when you look at it. I mean, this is a franchise that truly embodies perseverance. It shifted from these struggling origins as an expansion team up in Vancouver through that sometimes kind of directionless Pau Gasol era in the early 2000s to finally establishing itself as a consistent contender.
And what a journey it's been. You're right. Memphis is, I think, one of the most remarkable franchise turnarounds in modern sports. They went from being, a perennial stellar dweller to a respected, if still mid-market power. And when we look at the last, decade and a half of that success, there are 2 really distinct, almost titanic periods that stand out. The rugged, defensive-minded grit and grind era, and of course the explosive, high-seeding John Morant era.
Exactly. And that split brings us to our core disagreement today. We're asking which of these 2 periods, the grit and grind core that ran from, let's say, 2010 to 2019, or the current John Morant-driven era that started with that 2019 front office restructuring, which one established the most significant, the most enduring foundation for the Memphis Grizzlies franchise?
And for me, that foundation has to be judged by peak achievement and organizational structure. It just has to. So therefore, the John Morant era is the true operational peak. I mean, it achieved the highest success metrics, the highest seeding, and that's the undeniable foundation for sustainable, modern NBA relevance.
See, I think that focuses too heavily on the roof rather than the footing. My position is that the grit and grind era provided the essential identity, the culture, and the fundamental framework for success that even this current very talented team still relies on. It established what it means to be the Memphis Grizzlies in a way that nothing before or since has really touched.
Okay, so let's delve into what that grit and grind definition really encompasses then. I absolutely grant that the core of Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol, and Tony Allen provided a deep emotional connection to the city. I mean, it was cultural lightning in a bottle, for sure.
Oh, it was far more than emotion. It was defined by a tangible, a strategic uniqueness that delivered the franchise's most significant firsts. We often forget how unusual their style was in that era. A commitment to disruptive defense through high pressure on the ball, which is why they led the league in steals in 2010-11. And they married that defense with this stubborn, efficient, inside-out offense, routinely leading the league in points in the paint. They were kind of the anti-modern NBA, and it worked.
They were definitely contrarian.
And that contrarian spirit is what broke the franchise curse. In 2011, as an 8 seed, they achieved their first ever playoff series victory, stunning the top-seeded San Antonio Spurs. That wasn't just a win. It was one of the most historically significant upsets in NBA history. It was only the second time an 8 seed had beaten a 1 seed in a best-of-7 series. I mean, that is the kind of breakthrough that defines a franchise for decades, regardless of what comes later.
That 2011 series set the tone, certainly. But while that core, which, gave us the first Western Conference Finals appearance in 2013, and whose two biggest names, Z-Bo and Marc Gasol, had their numbers retired, it was beloved, but it hit a very definite ceiling.
A ceiling they constructed themselves, I might add.
I would argue the current era constructs a higher ceiling. You focus on the roots, but I'm focusing on the structural height. The Ja Morant era, guided by that whole restructuring under Zachary Kleiman in 2019, delivered the highest level of institutional success and, frankly, validation.
And what evidence do you have that Kleiman's structure is a better foundation in the grit and grind culture?
Quantifiable organizational dominance. The grit and grind teams, for all their tenacity, were frequently just battling to make the playoffs. They rarely secured home court advantage. They peaked at the 5th seed twice. By contrast, the Morant era, in 2021-22, clinched the franchise's first ever division title and secured the West's highest ever regular season standing, the 2nd seed, on the strength of a franchise-best 56 wins. And then they immediately repeated as division champs the next year. That kind of operational efficiency shown over multiple seasons provides a much stronger foundation for the future.
I see that level of regular season mastery, and I grant you the 2nd seed is a major achievement, especially in the West. But that 56 win mark itself is actually shared with the 2012-13 grit and grind team. So your argument really rests on seeding, while mine rests on substantive historical achievement and cultural adoption.
Seeding is substantive. It dictates your entire path through the playoffs, and what's more, the current structure yields definitive, top-tier individual success that validates the whole system. Ja Morant wins Rookie of the Year. Jaren Jackson Jr. was named Defensive Player of the Year. These are concrete proofs of concept for a modern, high-functioning front office. The foundation Kleiman laid prioritizes high-value talent acquisition and development, which is just superior to the G&G Foundation, which relied pretty heavily on late-career free agents and, the lottery miracle of that Marc Gasol trade.
That comparison actually brings up a vital point I want to address right away. The difference between a cultural foundation and just a sheer statistical peak. You're measuring the success of the house by the altitude of its tallest chimney. I'm measuring it by the depth of the basement.
And I believe your basement was structurally sound, but ultimately outdated.
Perhaps. But it was enduring. The G&G core proved that a mid-market team could build a winning culture that resonated deeply enough to last for almost a decade, even when they were rejecting the league's trend toward pace and space. You can't just dismiss the power of that 2011 upset and the WCF run in 2013. Those events did more than win games. They defined Memphis basketball nationwide.
Defined it, yes, but did they truly build the foundation?
They provided the patience and the buy-in from the community that was needed for the franchise to survive what came next. I mean, think about the cultural artifacts. The Growl Towels, which became a whole franchise tradition during those 7 straight playoff runs. or the spontaneous electric adoption of Whoop That Trick as a signature chant during the 2013 Clipper series. That kind of enduring connection, where the team's identity is just inseparable from the city's personality, that is the most stable foundation a franchise can possibly have. It provides deep, long-term fan capital.
Fan capital is wonderful, but it is fickle when the team doesn't perform. We saw that in the 2023-24 season. But I want to challenge this premise that culture is the primary foundation. If the culture was so strong and enduring, why was the pivot in 2019, dismantling that beloved core, so incredibly painful for the fan base? Didn't the new regime demonstrate a stronger foundational strategy by prioritizing objective metrics over that deep yet ultimately limiting emotional attachment?
You've hit on the crux of the debate. Yes, the pivot was painful, but the climate only had the political capital to dismantle a revered, identity-defining core because the G&G teams had already earned the city's trust. They established the belief that Memphis was a winning basketball town. So Kleiman's success is built upon the goodwill fostered by Conley, Zebo, and Gasol. That cultural foundation provided the patience for the rebuild to even work.
I see why you frame it that way as a necessary inheritance, but I would argue the act of dismantling the core was the true foundational moment for the Morant era. It required a level of strategic foresight and ruthlessness that the previous management often lacked, especially when it came to adapting to the modern game.
Okay, let's pivot to the assembly process itself then. If we're talking foundation, we have to talk about how the front office actually built these teams. I maintain that the G&G core was assembled through shrewd moves that provided long-term structural value, not just high lottery luck.
Shrewd moves like trading Pau Gasol to the Lakers for what everyone at the time ridiculed as a minimal return?
Exactly. That trade in 2008, while painful at first, was foundational because we acquired the rights to his younger brother, Marc Gasol. Acquiring a future Defensive Player of the Year and franchise cornerstone for what was basically a salary dump and draft filler, that shows brilliant long-term talent evaluation. You couple that with the savvy free agent signing of Zach Randolph in 2009, a player others had given up on, and you have a core built on organizational intelligence, finding value where others didn't, not just relying on draft order.
That's a compelling narrative, but I'm sorry, I just don't buy that it's superior to the current system. The foundation established by the Morant-era management was crucial for sustainable future success. They recognized the flaws of the G&G roster, a lack of three-point shooting, aging players, a slow pace, and they acted decisively.
So you prioritize adaptability over stability.
Precisely. The decision to trade Marc Gasol and Mike Conley Jr. in 2019 was a masterstroke of organizational timing. It led directly to getting the second overall pick for Ja Morant and trading into the draft for Brandon Clark and later Desmond Bane. The foundational success of this era is that the Kleiman-led front office implemented a modern analytical architecture required to achieve elite regular season metrics. They were successful because they realized the grit and grind foundation was rigid and fundamentally incompatible with championship-level basketball in the 2020s.
I acknowledge the success of those picks, particularly Morant and Bane, but the definition of a foundation has to include stability. So let's look at the postseason results. Both eras, you argue, suffered similar fates.
They did. Neither foundation led to the ultimate goal. The G&G era was swept in the 2013 Western Conference Finals, and they had multiple early sweeps before that. The Morant era, despite that second seed, has also seen, discouraging results, like the first-round loss to the 7-seed Lakers in 2023 and that quick, humbling sweep by the Thunder in 2025. If the foundation was truly set, why haven't they progressed further? The Morant team should be outperforming grit and grind based on its higher regular season dominance.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The foundation provided by grit and grind was rooted in longevity and credibility. 7 consecutive playoff runs. That is a foundational baseline of sustained relevance that gave Memphis a permanent identity as a tough, respected opponent. This is where foundation translates into team reputation. Those runs established intense, memorable rivalries with the Clippers and the Thunder, rivalries that defined a generation of Western Conference basketball. That reputation persists.
But credibility doesn't survive volatility.
The Morant era achieved a higher, sharper peak with 56 wins, but it showed immediate alarming fragility. The very next season, 2023-24, was injury-riddled and resulted in a sharp drop to a 27-55 record, setting a record for the most players used. That level of collapse suggests that the foundation is structurally unsound, relying too heavily on the health of one or two top-tier talents. The G&G era, defined by a system and collective defense, proved far more robust in handling those inevitable roster changes and injuries.
And that, for me, is the clearest distinction. The G&G system survived injuries and maintained playoff relevance for nearly a decade. It built the identity that makes the franchise valuable and relevant today. You're measuring foundation by peak statistical output. I measure it by sustained cultural and competitive relevance through adversity.
But the organizational peak has been achieved under the current structure. A foundation that delivers 2 division titles and a second seed is, mathematically, superior to one that never cracked the top 4. The G&G foundation was the concrete mix. The Morant era is the blueprint that proved the architecture could actually support a skyscraper.
So we've established that this debate really hinges on defining what a franchise foundation truly is. Is it the indelible spirit and community identity that guarantees relevance? Or is it the strategic organizational architecture that yields the highest measurable competitive success?
My position remains that the Ja Morant era represents the superior operational foundation. Achieving a record-setting 56-win season, getting 2 division titles, and claiming the highest seeding in franchise history, those are objective metrics that prove a superior, modernized structure was built in 2019. It validated the team's ability to compete at the absolute highest level.
And I continue to champion the grit and grind era for creating that indelible cultural spirit. The roots, the toughness, the rivalries, and the fan engagement. They achieved the franchise's first playoff series victory and first conference finals appearance, defining the very essence of modern Memphis basketball. Those cultural roots provided the necessary community foundation for any future peak to be meaningful and stable.
Ultimately, the history of the Grizzlies is a fascinating case study. The continuous evolution from the trade of Pau Gasol, which yielded the core of that defensive grit and grind identity, into the high-seed analytical Morant era, it demonstrates a remarkable upward trajectory.
It leaves the listener with a compelling choice to weigh. What legacy provides the lasting foundation for an organization? Is it the decade of consistent identity-defining culture, or the organizational validation you get through peak, measurable, regular season success? A complex question that I think speaks to the heart of what builds a lasting NBA franchise.